Are you a high-performing parent, entrepreneur, or high achiever in pursuit of excellence? Welcome to The Nexus Podcast, a podcast custom tailored for families like ours, driven, affluent, and eager to lead extraordinary lives. From rockstar stay-at-home moms to high-producing CEOs, we choose to model success for everyone we are surrounded by. We prioritize health over sickness, embrace a vitalistic lifestyle, and seek to tap into the limitless potential that God has bestowed upon us. I'm Dr. Daniel Kimbley, your host, and on this podcast, we'll uncover the secrets to living a fulfilling and abundant life, where you and your loved ones can thrive physically, mentally, and spiritually. Together, we'll forge a path to greatness and unleash your God-given capabilities. Get ready to say yes to a life of true prosperity and well-being. This is The Nexus Podcast. What's up, Nexus fam? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And I have just been on a tear of really sitting down and trying to create new, cool content and things for my life, to be honest with you. And so one of the things that's come up this week has been this idea that Legos have taught me so much about my life and about chiropractic, and I have a very specific principle that I want to share with you today that is not a chiropractic principle, but it actually comes from the shirt that I am wearing. And so some of you may immediately recognize it, most of you probably will not. But the shirt is representative of something that I went through back in 2018. It was called Warrior Week with one of my mentors and now dear friends. His name's Garrett White. And he put on these events called Warrior Weeks. And one of the things that you had to do as pre-work leading up to this Warrior Week was you had to learn some specific rules. Now, one of the specific rules, I won't share them all with you, but one of the rules that we had to learn was the rule that details matter. Details matter. And you know, as I'm thinking about Legos and I'm thinking about my daughter and I'm thinking about what I wanted to share with you on this podcast today, I had this realization. So my daughter, just a few weeks ago, we went and got her some Legos. Basically what happened was someone gave Coco a Ziploc bag full of Legos and they were like, hey, play with these. And you know, there weren't a lot of like great pieces in it, but there were enough pieces that she was just obsessed. She was like massively just creating new things, and every day all she wanted to do was play with Legos. And I thought it was really, really cool. So I'm like, hey, since you're so into Legos, why don't we just go get you like a Lego kit so you can actually start to build and create and just have more tools to make like some really, really fun stuff. So what happened is we get to the Lego store, we buy her the Legos, and then I didn't really realize it, but it's not like we bought her a kit or one of the things that you would imagine where you just follow the steps and build. But we just bought her a general box of Legos with a bunch of different colors, a bunch of different sizes, a bunch of different shapes. But inside the box comes with instruction kits, and I did not know this about Legos because I haven't had them since I was very, very little. Inside the box is 2 booklets full of instructions on how to build certain things with the kit or with that set of Legos that we had just bought. And it was a bunch of different things. Like you could build houses, you could build buildings, you could build a frog, you could build a bear. There are a number of different things. And so my daughter and I pretty quickly, like, we got hyped up on this idea of like, hey, let's build this house, or let's build this yard, or let's build these buildings. And as we're doing it, we have to sit and we have to flip through. If you're familiar with Legos, it literally gives you a step-by-step set of instructions in order to figure out like what you have to build first in order to build on the next thing. And I couldn't help but think about it as I'm sitting and I'm watching my daughter do it, is one of the things that she struggled with in the beginning was this idea of details. And realizing that like, oh, that piece has 3 dots on top versus 2 dots on top, or that piece has to be turned this way versus turned this way. And there are all these little subtle details in building Legos that are seemingly insignificant, but if you don't put the details and the pieces in the right order at the right time in the right place, then literally what you get is something that you intended to build that you actually couldn't ever build in the first place. And you know, as I'm sitting and I'm watching her and I'm watching her figure out and I'm watching her pay attention to details, like so many thoughts are flooding my brain. And one of the things that flooded my brain is this idea of like how this idea of details matter that I learned from Garrett White in Warrior Week, which is why I have on the shirt today, is I wanted to just it more to be a representation of like this reminder to me that, hey, details do matter. And every single thing that you do in your life, I would have you consider that the details of those things that you do or choose not to do matter, and they matter a lot. And so when I'm thinking about this in terms of my daughter, when I'm thinking about this in terms of chiropractic, obviously it's easy to sit down with the Legos and realize that like, oh, if that piece goes in the wrong spot, then we can't build on that. And the same thing is true from a chiropractic perspective. I think one of the things that I'm often frustrated by, or that breaks my heart sometimes, is like people come into our office and they have questions, or I meet people on the street and they're like, hey, I haven't been able to get any help anywhere else. Like, explain to me what you do and how it's different. And we walk people through our process and we let them know, hey, here's exactly what we do. Here's exactly how it's different. And they can't seem to wrap their mind around this idea that it's the subtle nuances and the subtle details of what we do that is entirely different, but it allows you to get a result that you couldn't have gotten otherwise. And what's so interesting about this is, like, when I think about it, is there's a number of places we could go. And one of the things I want to do is just share a little bit of research with you because I thought it was super cool. And one of my people who I look up to in the chiropractic world, she's a chiropractor, but she's more of like a functional neurologist, to be honest with you, or even a neurologist. Like, she just studies the brain. She's fascinated with it. And back earlier this year, she had a study published that talks about what happens from a chiropractic perspective when we adjust a segment or adjust a certain part of the spine that needs an adjustment versus not needing an adjustment. And so what she found, and look, basically what she's measuring, I'll just back up before I tell you what she found, is she's measuring this thing called N30 frontal amplitude, or frontal N30 amplitude. And so the frontal N30 amplitude is basically this measure of the connection of sensoromotor. So sensoro means what your body feels, and then how that expresses itself as motor back out to the system. And this includes like some very specific parts of the brain, one of them being the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is responsible for our executive functions, or it's a piece of the brain that's responsible for our executive functions. So when I say executive functions, what I mean is grit, willpower, determination, curiosity. It's our emotional processing. It's setting a long-term goal and then being able to stick with it short-term. All the stuff you hear me talk about on this podcast all the time. And the reason I think it's so interesting, because what Heidi found in this study, and by measuring this frontal N30 amplitude, is that when we adjust segments of the spine that do not need adjusted, there is no change in the frontal N30 amplitude. And that when we do adjust segments of the spine that do need adjusted, there is a change in the frontal N30 amplitude, meaning that to be a good, effective chiropractor and get results, which is who I see people all the time who come in because they're like, I've seen 3 other chiropractors. I was having a conversation with a guy yesterday. Literally, his conversation with me went like this. He's like, dude, 8 years ago, probably 10 years ago now is when I started seeing chiropractors. He's like, for 8 years I suffered and I barely had any change. He's like, I started seeing you 2 years ago and my world is completely flipped upside down in terms of what I experience in my back, in terms I experience in my clarity and my connection with my wife and my kids. And the reason is because of the process and the approach that we take to address the brain and the brain function, and the way that we address that frontal N30 amplitude, we're literally changing his brain so he gets results that he could have never gotten before. And this is the key, right? This is the important piece of this, is that details matter. It matters where you adjust. So many people get so fascinated. They're like, oh, I love the TikTok videos and I love the celebrity videos of the Orange County chiropractor who's adjusting people on both sides of the neck and both sides of the back, and it's just lots of pops and cracks. Guess what? The reality is the lots of popping and cracking makes no difference. It has to be in the right place and at the right time. And the reality is like there are very few people who need to be adjusted on both sides of their body at the same exact time, in my opinion. And so I share this with you because there's this idea that details matter, and what we do inside of our office and what we do chiropractically to work with someone to help them get a level of results that is different than they have ever experienced before is because we are literally taking the attention to detail and the attention to what is happening with your specific body, with your specific brain, to allow it to build and allow it to grow and allow it to express these executive functions in a way that, like, quite frankly, probably weren't possible before, because they're not possible when your body's stuck in a stressed out state. And I've had multiple conversations in the last week. Like, we had a kiddo whose cough went completely away. Mom was super concerned about it. We had a mom who, she's been like chronically sore every day at the end of the day, busy, stressed out. Guess what? No more pain. We have another mom experiencing the exact same thing. We have another mama bringing her kid in for sleep issues. For the first time in his entire life, he had 2 great nights of sleep in a row. Why? Because of the attention to detail that we give to each person who walks through our doors. So when people complain that they want us to stick around forever, when people complain that we're too expensive, it's like, you get what you pay for, right? You can go to the chiropractor down the street who's going to pop both sides of your neck and both sides of your back, and it's going to feel good for a moment, but everything comes back, and then you wonder why none of it worked, and you feel like you wasted money. And the reality is like there is an attention to detail. And this isn't just me, Dr. Daniel, like spouting off some stuff because he's proud of his practice. This is about you. Like this is about seeing people thrive. We believe in our office that God gave each of us the potential to express life at 100%, to be healthy, to be strong, to be vital. But the reality is that our bodies cannot do it when it is stuck in a stressed out state. And so what we are doing is with an attention to detail and attention to the testing that we do with you, with each individual that we sit down with, we can start to make changes in their brain. And through the speed of the adjustment that we do, and through the results that we get, we know unequivocally that we are getting an impact and a change in that frontal N30 amplitude, because if we weren't, the people wouldn't get results in the first place. And this is why we have so many case studies. This is why we have so many testimonials. This is why we have so many amazing clients that we get to take care of. And people realize it's like, this is the connection to God. Like this is connection to source. The front part of your brain is responsible for faith, hope, and optimism, which, by the way, are also executive functions. And so when we think about faith, hope, and optimism, if you can't be faithful, if you can't be hopeful, if you can't be optimistic, the reason that would happen is because stress hormones are turning off the front part of your brain. And when we're adjusting you, we're literally waking that up. And so when we talk about connection to God and connection to your purpose in life, it's like this is what we help people with. Yes, we get people out of pain. That's amazing. It's great. But when people say, my whole life's been transformed, like I just see the world differently. I connect with my kids differently. I connect with my spouse differently. I connect to my job differently. I want to do something different. I want to take a risk for the first time. It's because we've affected that frontal N30 amplitude and allowed for the skills that are housed in the prefrontal cortex in the first place. So my friends, my question for you is this, is like, where in your life have you not been paying attention to details? And I could give so many examples of this, right? Like I have a friend of mine who asked me, he's like, dude, help me with my macros, help me with my nutrition stuff. And I'm like, okay, but you got to weigh and measure all your food. So we have a conversation, they're weighing and measuring all their food, but they're not counting any of the alcohol that they're drinking. And I'm like, dude, the details matter. Literally every single little detail of everything matters. Details matter inside of your life. So for you, where inside of your life are you not paying attention to details? Where are there subtleties that if they were changed, you might get a new level of results? And what I know and what I've seen inside my office is like, these are the people that we help because we pay such attention to detail. And it's not to pump ourselves up, right? It's literally to bring back the God-given potential that each of us has inside of us, ready to be expressed, but cannot be expressed in a stressed out state. So my friends, just like with Coco, sitting down, playing with Legos, details matter. In order to build what she wanted to build, she had to pay attention to details. And the same thing is true for you. In order to build what you want to build inside of your life, in order to build what you want to build inside of your kids, in order what you want to express and what you want to see inside of your world, has to come from an attention to detail. Because ultimately, my friends, the details matter. I love you, I appreciate you, and I will come at you again next week. Peace.